The Flower Ornament Sutra, Book 5, The Flower Bank World. Then the enlightening being universally good again addressed the great assembly, saying, "Children of Buddha, this flower bank array, ocean of worlds, was adorned and purified by Vairochana Buddha, as in the remote past he cultivated enlightening practices for as many eons as atoms in an ocean of worlds, in each eon associating with as many Buddhas as there are atoms in an ocean of worlds, in the presence of each Buddha purely practicing great vows as numerous as atoms in an ocean of worlds. This flower bank array, ocean of worlds, is supported by as many atmospheres as there are atoms in the polar mountain. The bottommost atmosphere is called impartial abode. It holds arrays of blazing flames of all jewels above it. The next atmosphere is called producing various precious adornments. It holds diamond banners radiant with pure light above it. The next higher atmosphere is called precious power. It holds chimes of all jewels above it. The next higher atmosphere is called impartial flavor. It holds diamond orbs of the appearance of sunlight above it. The next higher atmosphere is called various universal adornments. It holds flowers of light discs above it. The next higher atmosphere is called universal purity. It holds flaming lion thrones of all flowers above it. The next higher atmosphere is called sound pervading the 10 directions. It holds banners of all regal pearls above it. The next higher atmosphere is called light of all jewels. It holds all diamond tree flowers above it. The next higher atmosphere is called high velocity universal support. It holds mountainous clouds of all fragrant gems above it. The next higher atmosphere is called various mansions in motion. It holds clouds of pedestals of all precious colors and fragrances above it. The uppermost of those atmospheres, as numerous as atoms in a mountain, is called repository of supreme light. It holds an ocean of fragrant water, adorned by radiant diamonds. In this ocean of fragrant water is an enormous lotus blossom, called banner of fragrance, with pistils of all kinds of lights. This flower bank array, ocean of worlds, rests therein. This ocean of worlds is square and level, pure and stable, surrounded by diamond circular mountains. Its lands, seas, and trees each have distinct boundaries. Then, universally good, to recapitulate, looked over the 10 directions with the power of the Buddha and said in verse, "In the past, the Buddha in all states of being cultivated pure deeds with Buddhas as many as atoms. Thus he attained the flower bank array ocean of world with all kinds of jewel lights. His vast clouds of mercy cover all. He has given up his body innumerable times. Because of the power of his past eons of practice, this world now has no defilements. It emanates great light, which abides throughout space. Held by atmospheric power, it doesn't tremble or quake. It is adorned everywhere by jewels of Buddha's treasury. The power of Buddha's vows has made it pure. Strewn about are flowers of beautiful mines of jewels, resting in the sky through the power of ancient vows. Over an ocean of various adornments, stable and strong, clouds of light spread, filling the 10 directions. In all the jewels are clouds of enlightening beings, traveling to all quarters, blazing with light. Rimmed with glowing flames, beautiful flower ornaments circulate throughout the universe, reaching everywhere. From all the jewels emanates pure light, which totally illumines the ocean of all beings. Pervading all lands in the 10 directions, it frees them from pain and turns them to enlightenment. The Buddhas in the jewels are equal in number to all beings. From their hair pores they emanate phantom forms, celestial beings, world rulers, and so on, including forms of all beings as well as Buddhas. Their magical light beams are as many as all things. In the light they intone the names of all Buddhas. By various means they teach and civilize, accommodating all the various minds everywhere. In each atom of the flower bank world is seen the universe of the elemental cosmos. Jewel lights display Buddhas like masses of clouds. This is the Buddha's freedom in his field. The vast cloud of his vows extends throughout the cosmos, edifying all beings throughout all time. Having completed the practice of the state of knowledge of universal good, all the adornments there are emerged from here. Then universally good again address the great congregation. Children of Buddha, the surrounding mountains of this flower bank array ocean of worlds rest on lotus blossoms of sun pearls. Their mass is made of sandalwood crystals, their peaks of majestic diamonds. Their curves are made of precious stones of exquisite fragrance. They are composed of fiery diamonds. Rivers of all perfumes flow between them. Their forests are made of all kinds of jewels. They are covered with beautiful flowers and fragrant herbs, and studded with bright pearls. Nets of precious stones are draped all around. There are as many such beautiful adornments as there are atoms in an ocean of worlds. Then, to recapitulate, universally good, the enlightening being, receiving spiritual power from the Buddha, looked over the 10 directions and said in verse, "The great ocean of worlds has no bounds. Its circumference of jewels is pure and multicolored. All the adornments it has are of rare beauty. This comes from the spiritual power of the Buddha. Rings of jewels, rings of exquisite incense, as well as rings of pearls and lamp flames, various beautiful treasures adorn it, whereon rest a pure ring of mountains. Their mines are of solid jewels. They're decorated with rose gold. Their light blazes throughout the 10 directions. Inside and out they shine, all pure and clear. Made of masses of diamonds, also raining beautiful jewels, their jewel atmospheres are unique and different, radiating pure light, beautifying everywhere. The fragrant rivers divide into streams of infinite hues, scattering flower jewels and sandalwood, with lotuses thickly blooming like clothing spread, and rare plants abundantly growing, all of them aromatic. Countless jewel trees adorn everywhere, the colors of their blooming flowers radiantly bright. Various kinds of fine raiment are placed thereon, with clouds of light shining everywhere, all round and full. Countless, boundless, great enlightening beings, holding canopies, burning incense, fill the universe, each producing all wonderful voices, everywhere expounding the Buddha's true teaching. The trees of precious elements have branches of jewels, each jewel branch emitting light. Vairochana's pure body enters therein, causing all to see. In all the adornments are manifest Buddha bodies of countless forms and boundless numbers, all going to all quarters, reaching everywhere, the beings they teach also being limitless. All the adornments emit sublime sounds, expounding the circle of the Buddha's original vows. Buddha's independent power causes them to pervade all the pure oceans of lands there are. Then, universally good also said, "The land within the surrounding mountains of this ocean of worlds is all made of diamond. Its stable, strong adornments cannot be broken. It is clean and level. It is fringed by precious stones, and contains repositories of jewels. It is arrayed at intervals with all kinds of gems in the various forms of all sentient beings. It is strewn with jewel dust and spread with lotus blossoms, with jewels from fragrant mines placed among them. The various adornments fill everywhere, like clouds. It is decorated with all the embellishments of all the Buddha lands of past, present, and future. It is webbed with beautiful precious stones, which reflect the states of all the Buddhas like the net of Indra, emperor of the heavens, hanging there. The ground of this ocean of worlds has adornments such as these, as many as atoms in an ocean of worlds. Then, to recapitulate, universally good, receiving spiritual power from the Buddha, looked over the 10 directions and said, "That ground is level and utterly pure, firmly abiding, indestructible. It is adorned with jewels everywhere, with various gemstones interspersed. The diamond earth is most delightful, embellished with jewel rings and nets, spread with lotus blossoms in full bloom, with exquisite raiment covering all. Enlightening beings, celestial crowns, and jewel necklaces are spread all over the ground as decorations. Sandalwood-scented jewels are strewn about, all radiating pure, exquisite light. Jewel flowers flame, producing subtle light. Flames of light, like clouds, illuminate all. These flowers and myriad jewels are strewn over the ground for adornment. Dense clouds rise and fill the 10 directions with tremendous rays of light that have no end, reaching all lands in the 10 directions, expounding the Buddha's vivifying teaching. All the Buddha's vows are in the jewels, revealing boundless vast eons. What the Supreme Knower did in days gone by is all seen within these jewels. Into all the jewels of this ground come and enter all the Buddha fields, and into each atom of those Buddha fields also enter all lands. In the flower bank world, adorned with wondrous jewels, enlightening beings travel throughout the 10 directions, expounding the universal vows of the great hero. This is their power of freedom in enlightenment sights. The ground, arrayed with beautiful precious stones, radiates pure light, replete with all adornments, filling the cosmos, equal to space. Buddha's power naturally manifests like this. Those who master the vows of universal good, those of great knowledge who enter the Buddha's realm, can know, in this ocean of lands, all such mystic transformations as these. Then universally good also said to the assembly, "In the land masses of this ocean of worlds are seas of fragrant waters, as numerous as atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields. All beautiful jewels adorn the floors of those seas. Gems of exquisite fragrances adorn their shores. They are meshed with luminous diamonds. Their fragrant waters shine with the colors of all jewels. Flowers of all kinds of gems swirl on their surfaces. Sandalwood powder settles on the bottom of the seas. They emanate the sounds of Buddha's speech. They radiate jewel-like light. Boundless enlightening beings, holding various canopies, manifest mystic powers causing the adornments of all worlds to appear therein. Stairways of 10 kinds of precious substances are set out in rows, with balustrades of 10 kinds of jewels surrounding them. White lotuses ornamented with jewels, as many as atoms in 4 continents, are spread over the waters in full bloom. There are unspeakable hundreds of thousands of billions of trillions of banners of 10 precious elements, banners of belled gauze of raiments of all jewels, as many as sand grains in the Ganges River, jewel flower palaces of boundless forms, as many as sand grains in the Ganges River, 100,000 billion trillion lotus castles of 10 precious substances, forests of jewel trees, as many as atoms in 4 continents, networks of flaming jewels, as many sandalwood perfumes as grains of sand in the Ganges, and jewels of blazing radiance emitting the sounds of Buddha's speech. Unspeakable hundreds of thousands of billions of trillions of walls made of all jewels surround all of them, adorning everywhere. Then, to reiterate, universally good, spiritually empowered by the Buddha, looked over the 10 directions and said, "On the land masses of these worlds are seas of fragrant water adorned by jewels. Pure, beautiful gems line the sea floors, resting on diamond, indestructible. Heaps of jewels of fragrant mines form the shores. Orbs of sun-flame pearls are spread like clouds. Garlands of lotuses and exquisite jewels adorn everywhere, pure, without taint. The fragrant waters are clear and contain all colors. Precious flowers swirl, radiating light. Sounds that cause all to quake are heard far and near, expounding the subtle truth by the Buddha's mystic powers. The arrays of stairways contain all jewels and are studded at intervals with pearls. The surrounding balustrades are all made of jewels, with nets of lotuses and pearls draped like clouds. Gemstone trees stand in rows. Flower buds blossom, their luster bright. Various music is always playing. Buddha's mystic power makes it so. White lotuses of various superb jewels are spread in arrays on the fragrant water seas. Rays of fragrant flames never cease. Their vast auras fill everywhere. Banners of bright pearls, ever radiant, drapes of fine clothing ornamenting, nets of crystal bells, intone the sound of truth, causing hearers to head for Buddha knowledge. Lotuses of jewels form castles adorned with multicolored gems, while clouds of pearls shade the 4 corners, thus adorning the seas of fragrant waters. Walls surround everything, with facing towers arrayed on them. Countless lights are always shining, variously adorning the pure, clear seas. Vairochana, in ancient times, beautified and purified various oceans of lands like this, vast, broad, without bounds. All is the Buddha's sovereign power. Then, universally good went on to say to the great congregation, "Each one of the fragrant seas has as many rivers of fragrant waters as there are atoms in 4 continents, circling them to the right. All of them have diamond banks adorned with crystals of pure light, always manifesting clouds of jewel-color lights of the Buddhas, as well as the speech sounds of all sentient beings. The causal practices cultivated by the Buddhas, their various forms and characteristics, all emerge from the swirls in the rivers. There are networks of crystals and chimes of many jewels, wherein appear the adornments of all the oceans of worlds. Clouds of jewels cover them above. Those clouds show all the phantom Buddhas emanated in the 10 directions by Vairochana of the flower bank world, as well as the deeds of psychic power of all Buddhas. They also produce miraculous sounds extolling the names of the enlightened and enlightening beings of past, present, and future. From those fragrant waters constantly emerge clouds of light with the radiance of all jewels, continuing uninterrupted. If the full story be told, each river has as many adornments as atoms in an ocean of worlds. Then, to reiterate, universally good, with the psychic power he received from the Buddha, looked over the 10 directions and said, "Currents of pure fragrance fill the great rivers. Beautiful diamonds form their banks. Rings of jewel dust are spread on the ground. The various ornaments are all rare and fine. Jewel stairways arrayed in rows, beautifully adorned, balustrades surrounding, all extremely fine, flower decorations with stores of pearls, and various garlands draped all around. The fragrant water's jewel-like luster is pure, always spewing crystals in rushing currents. The flowers undulate with the ripples, all producing music intoning sublime truths. The mud is made of sandalwood powder. All splendid jewels swirl together. Aromas of stores of scent spread therein, emitting flames circulating fragrance everywhere. In the rivers are produced wonderful jewels, all emitting lights of blazing color. The lights cast reflections forming terrace seats, complete with canopies and garlands of pearls. In the diamonds appear bodies of Buddhas, their lights illumining the 10 directions lands. Circles of them decorate the riverbeds, always full of fragrant water, clear. Crystal nets, bells of gold, cover the rivers, broadcasting Buddha's voice, preaching all ways to enlightenment and the sublime practice of universal good. The crystals of the jewel banks are extremely pure and always produce the tones of the Buddha's original vows, telling of and showing the past deeds of all Buddhas. From the worlds of those rivers, enlightening beings constantly emerge like clouds, all traveling in the vast, extensive lands till all the universe is filled. Pure pearls are spread like clouds, covering all the fragrant rivers. Those pearls are as many as the appearances from Buddha's brow, clearly showing the images of all enlightened ones. Then universally good also said to the great assembly, "The land in between these rivers of fragrant waters is all variously adorned with beautiful jewels. Each land space has as many white lotuses decorated with jewels as there are atoms in 4 continents, surrounding and filling everywhere. Each has as many forests of jewel trees as atoms in 4 continents, standing in orderly rows, with each tree constantly producing clouds of all ornaments, diamonds shining within them. The fragrances of all kinds of flowers fill everywhere. Those trees also produce subtle sounds, speaking of the great vows practiced by all the Buddhas in all ages. They also scatter various kinds of diamonds all over the ground, diamonds with lotus auras, fragrant flame-light cloud diamonds, variously embellished diamonds, diamonds reflecting the colors of inconceivably many adornments, diamonds like stores of raiment of sunlight, diamonds draping clouds of webs of light throughout the 10 directions, diamonds reflecting the spiritual metamorphoses of all Buddhas, diamonds reflecting the ocean of consequences of actions of all sentient beings. There are as many of such as these as there are atoms in an ocean of worlds. The lands in between the fragrant rivers all have such adornments." Then, to reiterate, universally good, receiving spiritual power from the Buddha, looked over the 10 directions and said, "The land is level and thoroughly pure, garnished with gold and jewels. Trees in rows shade the land, with soaring trunks hung with branches and flowers like clouds. The twigs and stems are adorned with gems. The glow of their flowers make auras illumining all around. Their fruits of crystal hang like clouds, making all in the 10 directions visible. Diamonds are spread over the ground, adorning together with jewel pollen from the flowers. There are also crystal palaces, showing the reflected images of all beings. Diamonds reflecting the images of Buddhas are scattered all over the ground. Their luster pervades the 10 directions, revealing Buddhas in each and every atom. Arrays of exquisite jewels are distributed well, interspersed with networks of pearl lamps. Everywhere are crystal orbs, each showing the Buddha's powers. The arrays of jewels radiate light in which appear the phantom Buddhas, each one traveling everywhere and teaching with the 10 powers. White lotuses of jewels fill all the waters, their blooms all various, each shining endless light. All adornments of all ages appear in the crystal fruits. Their essential nature, unborn, cannot be grasped. This is the sovereign power of Buddha. All the adornments on this ground manifest the vast body of Buddha. It neither comes nor goes, but causes all to see by the power of Buddha's ancient vows. In each atom of this ground, all Buddha children cultivate the way. All see the lands predicted for their futures, all of them pure according to their wishes. Then universally good went on to declare, "The adornments of the ocean of worlds of the Buddha are inconceivable. Why? Each object in this flower bank array ocean of worlds is adorned by as many pure qualities as there are atoms in an ocean of worlds." Then, to reiterate this point, universally good, imbued with spiritual power from the Buddha, surveyed the 10 directions and said, "Every place in this ocean of lands is embellished with myriad jewels, their flames leaping into the sky, spreading like clouds, their light penetrating, always covering all. Jewels spew clouds without end, wherein appear images of all Buddhas. Their mystic powers and metamorphoses never stop, and all enlightening beings come and gather. All the jewels broadcast Buddha's voice, the sound exquisite, inconceivable. What Vairochana did in the past is always heard and seen within these jewels. The universal illuminators with pure auras all show their forms reflected in the ornaments, transforming, distributing their bodies, surrounded by congregations. They reach throughout all oceans of lands. Buddha's independent deeds of spiritual powers all pervade the lands of the 10 directions. Thereby are the oceans of lands purely adorned. All of this is seen within the jewels. The mystic displays in the 10 directions are all like images in a mirror. They just come from the spiritual willpower exercised by the Buddha in the past. If any can practice the deeds of universal goodness and enter the enlightening being's ocean of supreme knowledge, they can, in a single atom, manifest their bodies everywhere and purify many lands. For inconceivable billions of eons, having associated with all the Buddhas, everything they practice can be shown in a single instant. The Buddha's lands are like space, peerless, unborn, without any signs. To aid living beings, they beautify and purify lands, dwelling therein by the power of their original vows. Then universally good went on to say, "What worlds are there herein? I'll tell you. In these seas of fragrant waters, numerous as atoms and unspeakably many Buddha fields, rest an equal number of world systems. Each world system also contains an equal number of worlds. Those world systems in the oceans of worlds have various resting places, various shapes and forms, various substances and essences, various locations, various entryways, various adornments, various boundaries, various alignments, various similarities, and various powers of maintenance. Some of these world systems rest on seas of gigantic lotuses. Some rest on seas of jewel flowers of boundless forms. Some rest on seas of ornaments of treasures from repositories of all pearls. Some rest on seas of perfume. Some rest on seas of all flowers. Some rest on seas of crystal webs. Some rest on seas of swirling light. Some rest on seas of enlightening beings' jeweled crowns. Some rest on seas of the bodies of all the various living beings. Some rest on diamonds emanating the sounds of the voices of all Buddhas. There are as many of these, if fully expounded, as atoms in an ocean of worlds. Some of these world systems are shaped like high mountains, some like rivers, some like whirls, some like whirlpools, some like wheel rims, some like altars, some like forests, some like palaces, some like mountain banners, some like all geometric figures, some like wombs, some like lotus blossoms, some like baskets, some like bodies of sentient beings, some like clouds, some like the distinguishing features of Buddhas, some like spheres of light, some like webs of various pearls, some like all doors, some like various adornments. Their shapes, if fully told of, number as many as atoms in an ocean of worlds. As for the substances of these world systems, some are made of clouds of jewels of all quarters, some of multicolored flames, some of light beams, some of flames of precious scents, some of cotton flowers adorned by all jewels, some of images of enlightening beings, some of auras of Buddhas, some of physical forms of Buddhas, some of the light of one precious element, some of the lights of many precious elements, some of the sounds of the sea of blessings and virtues of all living beings, some of the sounds of the sea of actions of all living beings, some of the pure sounds of the sphere of all Buddhas, some of the sounds of the sea of great vows of all enlightening beings, some of the sounds of the formation and disintegration of the adornments of all lands, some of the sounds of the methods and techniques of all Buddhas, some of the sounds of the voices of boundless Buddhas, some of the voices of goodness of all sentient beings, some of the sounds of the mystical demonstrations of all Buddhas, some of the pure sounds of the ocean of virtue of all Buddhas. If fully told, there are as many of these as atoms in an ocean of worlds. Then, universally good, to reiterate what he meant, looked over the 10 directions by the power bestowed on him by the Buddha, and said in verse, "The stable, marvelous adornments of the systems of worlds, vast, pure treasuries of light, rest on seas of lotus blossom jewels, or on perfume seas, and so on. Shaped like mountains, cities, trees, altars, the world systems extend in all directions, their various adornments and shapes different, each set out in arrays. Pure light is the substance of some flower banks, and some clouds of jewels. Some world systems are made of flames, resting in indestructible mines of jewels. Clouds of lamps, colored lights of flames, and more, various boundless forms, all pure. Some are composed of sound, of the inconceivable teachings of Buddha. Some are sound produced by the power of vows, some of sounds of miraculous displays, some are those of beings' virtues, or the sounds of Buddha's qualities. The individual different aspects of the world systems are inconceivable, without end. The 10 directions are filled with them, their vast adornments manifesting spiritual powers. All the immense lands of the 10 directions enter into this system of worlds. Though we see all in the 10 directions enter, really there is no coming and no entry. One world system enters all, and all completely enter one. Their substances and characteristics remain as before, no different. Incomparable, immeasurable, they all pervade everywhere. In the atoms of all lands are seen Buddhas existing there. The voices of their oceans of vows are like thunder, subduing all sentient beings. The Buddha's body pervades all lands, which are also filled by countless enlightening beings. The Buddha's freedom has no equal, edifying all conscious creatures. Then Universally Good said, "These seas of fragrant waters, numerous as atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields, are in the flower bank array ocean of worlds, spread out like the net of Indra, king of the gods. The sea of fragrant water in the very center is called boundless light of beautiful flowers. Its floor is made of diamond banners reflecting the forms of all enlightening beings. It produces huge lotuses called diamond adornments of all sense. There is a system of worlds resting on it called blazing light illuming the 10 directions. Composed of all ornaments, it contains as many worlds as atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields, arrayed therein. In the nadir is a world called Supreme Light shining everywhere, adorned by all kinds of diamonds, bounded by a circle of light, resting on flowers of many jewels, shaped like a crystal, covered with clouds of arrays of flowers of all gems, surrounded by worlds as numerous as atoms in a Buddha field, with various structures and various adornments. The Buddha of this world is called undefiled lamp of the eye of purity. Above this, past worlds as numerous as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called beautiful array of lotus flowers of various scents, bounded by all kinds of ornaments, resting on a network of jewel lotus blossoms, shaped like a lion throne, covered with nets of pearls of the colors of all jewels, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 2 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called Supreme Radiance of Lion Light. Above this, past worlds as numerous as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called All-Illuminating Light of Ornaments of All Jewels, bounded by an atmosphere of perfume, resting on garlands of various gems, octagonal in shape, covered by clouds of solar discs of crystals with subtle light, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 3 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called Banner of Supreme Knowledge like Pure Light. Above this, past worlds as numerous as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Array of Flowers of Various Lights, bounded by all the finest jewels, resting on a sea of pure banners of multicolored diamonds, shaped like a crystal lotus blossom, covered by clouds of diamond light, orbited by worlds as numerous as atoms in 4 Buddha fields, all thoroughly pure. The Buddha is called Diamond Light with infinite energy skillfully producing manifestations. Above this, past worlds as numerous as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Radiating Light of Beautiful Flowers, bounded by nets adorned with bells of all jewels, resting on a sea of networks of jewel spheres adorned with forests of all trees, geometric in shape, with many angles and sides, covered by clouds of diamonds with pure resonance, surrounded by worlds as many as atoms in 5 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called Ocean of Joyful Power of Fragrant Light. Above this, past worlds as numerous as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Pure Subtle Light, bounded by banners decorated with diamonds, resting on a sea of diamond palaces, square in shape, covered by clouds of drapes of crystal orb topknots, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 6 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called a banner of sovereignty with universal light. Above this, past worlds as numerous as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called a ray of radiance of myriad flowers, bounded by decorations of all kinds of flowers, resting on a sea of flames of the colors of all jewels, shaped like a palace, covered by clouds of robes of the colors of all jewels and railings of pearls, surrounded by worlds as numerous as atoms in 7 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha is called Ocean of Joy with the light of virtue, fame, and freedom. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Producing the State of Awesome Power, bounded by ornaments of diamonds that produce all sounds, resting on a sea of spheres of lotus thrones of the colors of various jewels, shaped like Indra's net, covered by clouds of flower webs of boundless colors, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 8 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called Renowned Banner of the Ocean of Knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Producing Wondrous Sounds, bounded by spherical arrays of mind jewels, resting on a sea of diamonds in cloud-like arrays, constantly producing all wonderful sounds, shaped like the body of a celestial king of the Brahma heaven, covered by clouds of lion thrones adorned with countless jewels, surrounded by as many worlds as there are atoms in 9 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called Invincible Radiance like pure moonlight. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Diamond Banner, bounded by garlands of gems from pearl treasuries of boundless adornments, resting on a crystal sea of jewel lion thrones with all adornments, spherical in shape, covered by mountainous clouds of jewel flowers of all fragrances, as numerous as atoms in 10 gigantic mountains, and surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha is called Supreme King of the Ocean of All Truths. Above this, past worlds as many as atoms in a Buddha field, there is a world called Constantly Producing Sapphire Light, bounded by arrays of indestructible diamonds, resting on a sea of various different flowers, shaped like the half-moon, covered by clouds of drapes of celestial jewels, surrounded by worlds as many as atoms in 11 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called Boundless Virtues. Above this, past worlds as many as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Light Shining, bounded by arrays of radiant lights, resting on a sea of perfume of flower swirls, shaped like a wreath, covered by clouds of various garments, surrounded by worlds as numerous as atoms in 12 Buddha fields. The Buddha is named Transcending the Gods. Above this, past worlds as many as atoms in a Buddha field, we come to this world, called Endurance, bounded by ornaments of diamonds, held by atmospheres of various colors, resting on a network of lotus flowers, shaped like space, covered by space adorned with spherical celestial palaces, surrounded by worlds as numerous as atoms in 13 Buddha fields. The Buddha is this Vairochana. Above this, past worlds as numerous as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Tranquil Undefiled Light, bounded by adornments of all jewels, resting on a sea of various kinds of precious raiment, shaped like a thunderbolt bearer, covered by clouds of diamonds of boundless colors, surrounded by worlds as numerous as atoms in 14 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called Supreme Sound Pervading the Cosmos. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Lamp of Many Beautiful Light Beams, bounded by drapes of all ornaments, resting on a sea of webs of pure flowers, shaped like a philpot, covered by clouds of seas of crystal trees and perfumed waters, surrounded by as many worlds as atomic particles in 15 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha is called universally illuminating banner of invincible strength. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called pure light shining everywhere, bounded by diamonds from inexhaustible clouds of jewels, resting on a sea of lotus flowers with various fragrant flames, shaped like a tortoise shell, covered by sandalwood clouds of radiant crystal orbs, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 16 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called eyes with the qualities of pure suns. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called mine of jewel ornaments, bounded by diamonds in the forms of all living beings, resting on a sea of diamonds from mines of light, octagonal in shape, covered by webs of flower trees, adorned by jewels from all the surrounding mountains, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 17 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called light of unhindered knowledge, illumining the 10 directions. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called dustless, bounded by ornaments of all kinds of exquisite forms, resting on a sea of lion thrones of myriad beautiful flowers, shaped like a pearl necklace, covered by clouds of auras of diamonds with all precious fragrances, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 18 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha is called Supreme Banner of Infinite Means. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Pure Light illuminating everywhere, bounded by diamonds producing inexhaustible clouds of jewels, resting on a sea of mountains of fragrant flames of infinite colors, shaped like a wreath of jewel flowers, covered by diamond clouds of light of boundless colors, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 19 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called light illumining all the space of the cosmos. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called beautiful jewel flames, bounded by jewels like the sun and moon illumining everywhere, resting on a sea of diamonds in the shapes of all celestial beings, shaped like jewel arrays, covered by clouds of banners of all precious robes and networks of banks of crystal lamps, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha is called shining with signs of virtue. This world system, blazing light illumining the 10 directions, has as many such vast worlds as there are atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields, each with their individual resting places, shapes, substances, and natures, aspects, entrances, adornments, boundaries, arrays, similarities, and powers of maintenance, all revolving around it. That is, there are as many spiral-shaped worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, a like number of river-shaped worlds, the same number of whirlpool-shaped worlds, the same number of wheel-rim-shaped worlds, the same number of altar-shaped worlds, the same number of forest-shaped worlds, the same number of tower-shaped worlds, the same number of forest-shaped worlds, the same number of pennant-shaped worlds, the same number of womb-shaped worlds, the same number of geometrically shaped worlds, the same number of lotus blossom-shaped worlds, the same number of basket-shaped worlds, the same number of worlds shaped like living creatures, the same number of Buddha-shaped worlds, the same number of light aura-shaped worlds, the same number of cloud-shaped worlds, the same number of net-shaped worlds, the same number of door-shaped worlds. There are as many such as atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields. Each of these worlds has as many enormous worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields surrounding it, each one also having as many worlds, the same as explained above. All of these worlds are in this boundless light of beautiful flowers, sea of fragrant waters, or in the rivers of fragrant water surrounding it. Then the enlightening being, universally good, also said to the great assembly, "East of this boundless light of beautiful flowers, sea of fragrant water, is another sea of fragrant water called repository of undefiled flames. It produces huge lotuses called beautiful adornments of diamonds with all scents. There is a world system resting on it called vortex of lands shining everywhere. Its substance is the roaring sound of deeds of enlightening beings. At its bottom is a world called palace decoration banner, square in shape, resting on a sea of ornaments of all precious stones, covered by clouds of webs of lotus light, surrounded by worlds as many as atoms in a Buddha field, all uniformly pure. The Buddha is named brow light illuminating everywhere. Above this, past worlds as many as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called repository of flowers of virtue, spherical in shape, resting on a sea of flower pistils made of all kinds of pearls, covered by clouds of lion thrones with pearl banners, orbited by as many worlds as atoms in 2 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called wisdom of the ocean of all boundless truths. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called fragrant circle of miracles, shaped like a diamond, resting on a sea of nets of chimes, adorned with all kinds of jewels, covered by clouds of auras of all kinds of ornaments, orbited by as many worlds as atoms in 3 Buddha fields. The Buddha is named light of virtuous characteristics shining everywhere. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called light of sublime color, shaped like a crystal orb, resting on a perfume sea of jewels of boundless colors, covered by clouds of palaces of radiant pearls, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 4 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha is named ubiquitous illumination producing good company. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called good cover, shaped like a lotus blossom, resting on a perfume sea of diamonds, covered by perfume clouds of undefiled light, orbited by as many worlds as atoms in 5 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called inexhaustible wisdom of delight in truth. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called wreath of light of pure flowers, triangular in shape, resting on arrays of all unbreakable jewels, covered by light beams from the jeweled crowns of enlightening beings, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 6 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called pure universal light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called array of jewel lotus blossoms, shaped like a half moon, resting on a sea of arrays of all kinds of lotuses, covered by clouds of flowers of all jewels, orbited by as many worlds as atoms in 7 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha is called pure eye of flowers of virtue. Above this, past worlds as many as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called repository of undefiled flames, shaped like a row of jewel lamps, resting on a sea of banks of jewel-like flames, covered by clouds of various bodies constantly raining perfume, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 8 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called invincible power of wisdom. Above this, past worlds as many as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sublime pure sound, shaped like a philpot, resting on a sea of jewel raiment, covered with clouds of drapes adorned with all flowers, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 9 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called enormous eyes like the clear moon in the sky. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sounds as numerous as atoms, shaped like the net of Indra, resting on a sea of waters of all precious elements, covered by clouds of jeweled canopies of all musical sounds, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called golden mountain lamp. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called array of jewel colors, shaped like a philpot, resting on a sea of gems shaped like the king of the gods, covered by clouds of flowers radiant as the sun, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 11 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called radiant knowledge illuminating the cosmos. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called golden light, shaped like a huge castle, resting on a sea of ornaments made of all jewels, covered by clouds of jewel flowers from scenes of enlightenment, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 12 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called banner of precious lamps lighting all. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sphere of light illumining everywhere, shaped like a wreath of flowers, resting on a sea of whirlpools of jewel raiment, covered by clouds of palaces made of diamonds emanating the sound of Buddha's voice, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 13 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called lotus flower illumining everywhere. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called jewel mine ornaments, shaped like 4 continents, resting on a mountain of jewel necklaces, covered by clouds of blazing jewels, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 14 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called blooming flowers of inexhaustible blessings. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called appearing everywhere like reflections in a mirror, shaped like the body of a titan, resting on a sea of diamond lotuses, covered by clouds of light rays from jeweled crowns, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 15 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called elixir sound. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sandalwood moon, octagonal in shape, resting on a sea of indestructible precious sandalwood, covered by clouds of pearl flowers, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 16 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha is called peerless knowledge of the supreme truth. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called untainted light, shaped like a whirlpool of fragrant water, resting on a sea of jewel light of boundless colors, covered by clouds of exquisitely aromatic light, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 17 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called sound of light illumining all space. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called array of beautiful flowers, spiral-shaped, resting on a sea of all flowers, covered by crystal clouds of all musical sounds, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 18 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called everywhere manifesting supreme light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called a ray of supreme sounds, shaped like a lion throne, resting on a sea of golden lion thrones, covered by clouds of banks of lotuses of all colors, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 19 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called universal light of renown for boundless virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called supremely high lamp, shaped like the Buddha's palm, resting on a sea of banners of perfume of precious raiment, covered by clouds of palaces made of jewels radiant as the sun, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, uniformly pure. The Buddha is called lamp illuminating space. South of this repository of undefiled flames, sea of fragrant waters, is another sea of fragrant waters called sphere of inexhaustible light, with a world system called a ray of banners of Buddhas, composed of the sounds of the ocean of virtues of all Buddhas. At the bottom of this world system is a world called Lovely Flower, shaped like a jewel disk, resting on a sea of diamonds from a mine of diamond trees, covered by clouds of jewel mines projecting reflections of forms of enlightening beings, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, all uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called joyful countenance of lotus light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sublime sound. The Buddha there is called wonderfully high jewel lamp. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called light of arrays of myriad jewels. The Buddha there is called banner of sounds of the cosmos. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called diamond treasury of fragrance. The Buddha there is called sound of light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called pure sound. The Buddha there is called supreme energy. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called a ray of jewel lotus blossoms. The Buddha there is called thunder of clouds of castles of truth. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called peace and bliss. The Buddha there is called renowned lamp of wisdom. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called undefiled net. The Buddha there is called ocean of virtues with invincible light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called flowering grove banner illumining everywhere. The Buddha there is called light of the lotus of great knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called innumerable adornments. The Buddha there is called banner of the real sphere of the universal eye. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called a ray of jewels of radiant light. The Buddha there is called great caravan leader of supreme knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Flower King. The Buddha there is called Moonlight Banner. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Undefiled Treasury. The Buddha there is called Pure Awareness. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Jewel Light. The Buddha there is called Lamp of the Space of Omniscience. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called producing jewel necklaces. The Buddha there is called light of the forms of the ocean of virtues of the ways of transcendence. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sublime circles covering all. The Buddha there is called subduing all attached minds and causing joy. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called jewel flower banner. The Buddha there is called great fame of extensive virtues. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called infinite adornments. The Buddha there is called ocean of qualities of light of impartial knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called banner of arrays of infinite lights, shaped like a lotus blossom, resting on a sea of webs of all jewels, covered by webs of lotus-like crystals, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called pure light of the cosmos. Turning the right of this sphere of inexhaustible light sea of fragrant water, there is a sea of fragrant water called diamond flame light, with a system of worlds called repository of arrays of Buddha halos, composed of voices extolling the names of all Buddhas. At the bottom of this world system is a world called jewel flame lotus, shaped like a curl of hair, the color of crystal, resting on a sea of whirlpools of the colors of all jewels, covered by clouds of palaces of all adornments, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, all uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called undefiled jewel light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called repository of flames of light. The Buddha there is called light of unhindered, independent wisdom. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called beautiful array of jewel discs. The Buddha there is called light of all jewels. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sandalwood tree flower banner. The Buddha is called light of pure knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called exquisite array of Buddha fields. The Buddha is called great sound of joy. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called array of subtle lights. The Buddha is called independent knowledge of the cosmos. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called boundless forms. The Buddha is called unimpeded knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called flame cloud banner. The Buddha is called non-regressive teaching. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called pure circle of jewel ornaments. The Buddha is called pure flower light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called great emancipation. The Buddha is called eye of the sun of unhindered knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called beautifully adorned diamond throne. The Buddha is called great light of knowledge of the cosmos. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called everywhere adorned by knowledge and wisdom. The Buddha there is called king of the light of the torch of knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called deep, wonderful sound of a lotus pond. The Buddha there is called omniscience illumining everywhere. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called varicolored light beams. The Buddha there is called Radiant Flower King Cloud. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Exquisite Jewel Banner. The Buddha there is called Light of Virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Crystal Flower Light. The Buddha there is called Cloud of Universal Sound. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Extremely Deep Ocean. The Buddha there is called Leader of all beings in the 10 directions. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called High Mountain Light. The Buddha there is called Sound of Universal Knowledge of the Cosmos. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Golden Lotus. The Buddha there is called Universal Light of the Repository of Virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Mine of Jewel Ornaments, shaped like a philpot, resting on a sea of trees of all scents, adorned by crystals, covered by clouds of pure light, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha is called Web of Light of Great Mystical Displays. Turning to the right of this diamond flame light sea of fragrant water, there is another sea of fragrant water called Sapphire Array, with a world system called Light Illumining the 10 Directions, resting on clouds of scent of lotus blossoms of all beautiful adornments, composed of the voices of boundless Buddhas. At the bottom of this system is a world called Wheel containing infinite colors of all quarters, shaped like a spiral with an infinite number of turns, resting on a sea of treasuries of jewels of unlimited colors, covered by the net of Indra, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, all uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called Lotus Eyes with all-illuminating light. Above this, past worlds as numerous as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Mine of Pure Exquisite Ornaments. The Buddha there is called Great Lion of Unexcelled Wisdom. Above this, past worlds as numerous as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Producing Lotus Thrones. The Buddha is called King of Light Illumining the Cosmos. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Jewel Banner Sound. The Buddha there is called Universal Repute of Great Virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Diamond Ornament Treasury. The Buddha there is called Lotus Sunlight. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Indra Flower Moon. The Buddha there is called Banner of Independent Knowledge of Truth. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Treasury of Beautiful Globes. The Buddha there is called Pure Sound of Great Joy. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Mine of Wonderful Sounds. The Buddha there is called Good Caravan Leader of Great Power. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Pure Moon. The Buddha there is called Power of Knowledge with Monumental Light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Boundless Adorning Marks. The Buddha there is called Pure Moonlight of Means and Vows. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Beautiful Flower Sound. The Buddha there is called sound of great vows of the ocean of truth. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called array of all jewelry. The Buddha there is called supreme heaven of beautiful sound. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called indestructible ground. The Buddha there is called form of jewel light of virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called universal light readily transforming. The Buddha there is called calm intellect with great energy. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called protective adorning action. The Buddha there is called gladdening to see. Above this, as past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sandalwood jewel flower treasury. The Buddha there is called all-illumining light of extremely profound, immutable wisdom. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sea of various colors and forms. The Buddha there is called radiating sovereign light of inconceivable ultimate truth. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called producing great lights in all directions. The Buddha there is called incomparable majestic light of supreme virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called mountain cloud banner. The Buddha there is called eyes of ultimately pure light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called radiant lotus, round in shape, resting on a sea of crystals of boundless colors and many wonderful fragrances, covered by clouds of ornaments of all vehicles, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called energetic sun of liberation. Turning to the right of this sapphire array, sea of fragrant water, there is another sea of fragrant water called diamond orb-adorned floor, with a world system called Indra's net studded with wonderful jewels, composed of sounds produced by the knowledge of universal virtue. At the bottom of this world system is a world called lotus blossom net, shaped like the polar mountain, resting on a sea of banners of mountains of beautiful flowers, covered by clouds of Indra's nets of diamonds from the sphere of Buddhahood, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, all uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called wisdom universally aware of the body of reality. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called endless sunlight. The Buddha there is called mind of supremely great awareness. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called radiating subtle light in all directions. The Buddha there is called endless power of clouds of great virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called tree blossom banner. The Buddha there is called sound of the cosmos of boundless knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called pearl canopy. The Buddha there is called transcendental lion stretch. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called boundless sound. The Buddha there is called omniscient awareness. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called forested peak visible everywhere. The Buddha there is called appearing before all beings. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called invincible light of Indra's net. The Buddha is called clouds of flames of golden light from a spotless sun. Above this, past worlds as many as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called jewel-studded. The Buddha there is called supreme wisdom. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called ground of undefiled light. The Buddha there is called pure moon with all powers. Above this, past worlds as many as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called constantly emitting sounds praising Buddha's virtues. The Buddha there is called space-like mind of universal awareness. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called high bank of flames. The Buddha there is called great cloud banners majestically appearing in all quarters. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sanctuary adorned with light. The Buddha there is called incomparable knowledge illumining everywhere. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called producing ornaments of all jewels. The Buddha there is called king of mystic powers widely liberating sentient beings. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called beautiful palace adorned with light. The Buddha there is called vast intellect establishing all truths. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called undefiled tranquility. The Buddha there is called not appearing in vain. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called banner of crystal flowers. The Buddha there is called auspicious sound delighting the mind. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called repository of universal clouds, shaped like a palace, resting on a perfume sea of various palaces, covered by clouds of lamps of all jewels, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called king of mystic powers of supreme awareness. Turning to the right of this diamond orb adorned floor sea of fragrant water is another sea of fragrant water called Lotus Blossom Indra Net, with a world system called Everywhere showing reflections of the 10 directions, resting on a lotus blossom adorned with jewels, with all kinds of scents, composed of the sounds of the light of knowledge of all Buddhas. At the bottom of this world system is a world called Jewel Light of the Ocean of Living Beings, shaped like a treasury of pearls, resting on a sea of garlands of all jewels, covered with clouds of crystals of the luster of water, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called all-illumining moon of inconceivable virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called wreath of wonderful fragrance. The Buddha there is called banner of infinite power. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sphere of subtle light. The Buddha there is called enlightening wisdom with the sound of the light of the cosmos. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called roaring crystal banner. The Buddha there is called lotus light with beautiful arms always hanging down. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sphere of extreme stability. The Buddha there is called light of the sea of non-regressive virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called array of light beams. The Buddha is called omniscient all-conqueror. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Lion Throne illumining everywhere. The Buddha is called infinitely powerful, enlightened wisdom with inconceivable light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called a ray of jewel flames. The Buddha is called pure knowledge of all things. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called immeasurable lamp. The Buddha is called no sign of distress. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called hearing Buddha's voice. The Buddha is called supremely magnificent, natural light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called pure metamorphoses. The Buddha is called golden lotus light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called entering all quarters. The Buddha is called expanding mind observing the cosmos. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called blazing flames. The Buddha is called light flame tree Kanara king. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called all-illumining aromatic light. The Buddha is called skillfully teaching fragrant lamp. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called wreath of innumerable flowers. The Buddha is called everywhere manifesting Buddha's virtues. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called universal purity of all subtleties. The Buddha is called king of psychic powers, equanimous toward all things. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sea of golden light. The Buddha is called freely manifesting any form in any place. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called pearl flower treasury. The Buddha there is called inconceivable wisdom with cosmic jewel light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called lofty lion throne of the gods. The Buddha is called light of supreme power. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called boundless jewel illumining everywhere. Square in shape, resting on a sea of flowered forests, covered by an imperial net raining diamonds everywhere, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called supreme sound illumining the whole world. Turning to the right of this lotus blossom indranet sea of fragrant water is another sea of fragrant water called treasury of accumulated precious incense, with a world system called array of all virtues, composed of the sounds of the teachings of all Buddhas. At the bottom of this system is a world called various products, shaped like a thunderbolt, resting on various diamond mountain banners, covered by clouds of diamond light, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, uniformly pure. The Buddha there is named Lotus Blossom Eyes. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Gladdening Sound. Its Buddha is producer of joy and bliss. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Jewel Ornament Banner. Its Buddha is omniscience. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Radiant Cotton Flowers. Its Buddha is subtle sound of pure calm. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called light of transformation and production. Its Buddha is moon of knowledge and pure space. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called exquisite arrays. Its Buddha is showing the forms of dense clouds of the sea of virtues. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called subtle sound of all ornaments. Its Buddha is clouds of joy. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called lotus pond. Its Buddha is banner of renown. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called array of all jewels. Its Buddha is expanding observant eye. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called pure flower. Its Buddha is called inexhaustible, indestructible knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called lotus-adorned city. Its Buddha is universal light of eyes like a mine of suns. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called mountain peak with innumerable trees. Its Buddha is thunder of all truths. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called sunlight. Its Buddha is demonstrating infinite knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called resting on lotus leaves. Its Buddha is mountain of all virtues. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called universally supporting atmosphere. Its Buddha is senses shining like the sun. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called evident light. Its Buddha is body glow illumining everywhere. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called all-illuminating diamond reverberating with fragrant thunder. Its Buddha is form of supreme flowers blooming. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called imperial net ornament, shaped like a balustrade, resting on a sea of all ornaments, covered by clouds of palaces of flames of light, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, uniformly pure. The Buddha there is named manifesting clouds of fearlessness. Turning to the right of this treasury of accumulated precious incense, sea of fragrant water, is another sea of fragrant water called Jewel Array, with a world system called Everywhere Undefiled, composed of sounds of spiritual metamorphoses of Buddha fields within all atoms. At the bottom of this system is a world called Pure Refinement, flat in shape, like a jewel, resting on a sea of light spheres of all jewels, covered by clouds of various sandalwood crystals and pearls, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called Peerless Banner of Invincibility. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Bright, Beautiful Adornments. Its Buddha is Lotus Mind, King of Mystical Powers. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Banner of Rings of Subtle Forms. Its Buddha is Endless Light of Universal Renown. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Marvelous Arrays of Crystals from Mines of Flames. Its Buddha is Great Wisdom and Knowledge delightful to all who see or hear. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Array of Exquisite Flowers. Its Buddha is supreme knowledge of infinite power. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called producing pure particles. Its Buddha is transcending the gods. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called scent of metamorphic productions of universal light. Its Buddha is scented elephant of unbreakable power. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called vortex of light. Its Buddha is good reputation of proven logic. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Sea of Jewel Necklaces. Its Buddha is incomparable light shining everywhere. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Banner of Lamps of Beautiful Flowers. Its Buddha is lamp of unhindered wisdom with ultimate virtues. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Array of Skillful Techniques. Its Buddha is transcendence of the Sun of Wisdom. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Radiant Light of Sandalwood Flowers. Its Buddha is sound of the cosmos of boundless wisdom. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Imperial Net Banner. Its Buddha is lamplight shining far. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Pure Flower Wreath. Its Buddha is light of the cosmic sun. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Great Awesome Radiance. Its Buddha is sound of the cycles of teaching of boundless virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Jewel Lotus Pond Abode of Common Peace. Its Buddha is showing knowledge entering into the inconceivable. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Level Ground. Its Buddha is King of Light of Jewels of Virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Mass of Aromatic Crystals. Its Buddha is exquisite adornments of the Sea of Inexhaustible Virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Subtle Light. Its Buddha is pervasive sound of incomparable power. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Radiance of Adornments, solid and stable everywhere, octagonal in shape, resting on a sea of Mind King crystal globes, covered by clouds of drapes adorned by all precious stones, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called Great Luminous Lamp of the Universal Eye. Turning to the right of this jewel array, sea of fragrant water, there is another sea of fragrant water called Mass of Diamonds, with a world system called Cosmic Action, composed of the enunciation of the principles of the methods pertaining to all of the stages of development of enlightening beings. At the bottom of this system is a world called Radiance of Pure Light, shaped like a string of pearls, resting on a sea of necklaces of pearls of all colors, covered by clouds of crystals of light from the pearl top-knots of enlightening beings, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called Light of Supreme Virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Wonderful Canopy. Its Buddha is mind free in all things. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called jewel-adorned lion throne. Its Buddha is called Great Dragon Abyss. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Producing Diamond Thrones. Its Buddha is called Ascending the Lotus Platform of a Lion Throne. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Supreme Lotus Sound. Its Buddha is all-enlightening light of knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Good Customs. Its Buddha is King of Sublime Light, holding the earth. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Sound of Happiness. Its Buddha is King of the Lamp of Truth. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Jewel Treasury Indra's Net. Its Buddha is Not Seen in Vain. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Myriad Wonderful Minds. Its Buddha is Flame Body Banner. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Wheel of Golden Light. Its Buddha is Purifying the Acts of Living Beings. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Adornments of the Polar Mountains. Its Buddha is Clouds of all virtues shining everywhere. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Shapes of Myriad Trees. Its Buddha is Awareness like a pure moon, like a jewel flower. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called No Fear. Its Buddha is Torch of Supreme Golden Light. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Dragon King Banner of Great Renown. Its Buddha is Seeing All Things as Equal. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Displaying Crystal Colors. Its Buddha is Sun of Metamorphic Production. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Array of Light Flame Lamps. Its Buddha is Jewel Canopy Light, illumining all. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Fragrant Light Cloud. Its Buddha is Contemplative Wisdom. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called No Enmity. Its Buddha is Ocean of Energetic Supreme Intellect. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Banner of Lights of All Adornments. Its Buddha is Sovereign King, able to produce delightful lotuses anywhere. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Hair Curl Adornments, shaped like a half-moon, resting on a sea of crystal flowers from the polar mountain, covered by clouds of radiant diamonds of all kinds of ornaments, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. Its Buddha is called Pure Eye. Turning to the right of this diamond mass, sea of fragrant water, there is another sea of fragrant water called Jewel Ramparts of Celestial Cities, with a world system called Lamp Flame Light, composed of the sounds of all impartial teachings. At the bottom of this system is a world called Ring of Jewel Moonlight Flowers, shaped like all kinds of ornaments, resting on a sea of flowers embellished with all kinds of jewels, covered by clouds of lion thrones the color of lapis lazuli, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field. The Buddha there is called Free Light of Sun and Moon. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Polar Mountain Jewel Light. Its Buddha is banner of inexhaustible jewels of truth. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Myriad Beautiful Light Beams. Its Buddha is great mass of flowers. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Crystal Light Flower. Its Buddha is most independent of humans. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Universal Sound. Its Buddha is omniscience illumining everywhere. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Great Tree Kinara Sound. Its Buddha is independent dragon with infinite virtues. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Boundless Pure Light. Its Buddha is light of jewel flowers of virtue. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Supreme Sound. Its Buddha is a ray of all knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Decorated with Many Jewels. Its Buddha is Jewel Flame Polar Mountain. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Pure Wonderfully High Sound. Its Buddha is manifesting the light of all practices. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Perfume Canopy. Its Buddha is unobstructed ocean of all transcendent ways. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Lion Flower Net. Its Buddha is Jewel Flame Banner. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Lamp of Beautiful Diamond Flowers. Its Buddha is Light of All Great Vows. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Stage of Illumination of All Things. Its Buddha is Vast True Meaning of All Things. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Level Ornaments of Pearl Dust. Its Buddha is Net of Light of Supreme Wisdom. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Lapis Lazuli Flowers. Its Buddha is called Jewel Cluster Banner. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Sphere of Immeasurable Subtle Lights. Its Buddha is Oceanic Treasury of Great Powerful Knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Clearly Seeing the 10 Directions. Its Buddha is Banner of Pure Cultivation of All Virtues. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, is a world called Pleasing Pure Sound, shaped like Buddha's hand, resting on a sea of networks of jewel lights, covered by clouds of all adornments of enlightening beings' bodies, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called Unimpeded Light illumining the entire cosmos. The enlightening being universally good also said to the great congregation, East of the repository of undefiled flames, sea of fragrant water, is another sea of fragrant water called Subtle Body of Mystic Emanation. In this sea is a system of worlds called Well-Arrayed Different Quarters. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called Adamantine Eye Banner, with a world system called Bridges Adorning the Universe. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called Beautiful Arrays of Various Lotuses, with a world system called constantly producing emanations in the 10 directions. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called gapless diamond wheel, with a world system called dense clouds of jewel lotus stems. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called flames of wonderful fragrance adorning everywhere, with a world system called Vairochana's acts of metamorphosis and emanation. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called Gold Banner of Jewel Dust, with a world system called Realm of the Buddha's Protection. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called Blazing Lights of All Colors, with a world system called Supreme Light Shining Everywhere. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called Realm of All Embellishments, with a world system called Jewel Flame Lamp. There are as many such seas of fragrant waters as atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields. The sea of fragrant water closest to the perimeter mountains is called Crystal Ground, with a world system called Always Radiating Light, composed of the sounds of the pure eons of the ocean of worlds. At the bottom of this world system is a world called Banner of Pleasing Pure Light, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called Energetic Wisdom with Supreme Concentration. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, level with the world Diamond Banner, the world on the 10th level of the world system of the Sea of Fragrant Water in the center is a world called Banner of Arrays of Fragrances, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called Unobstructed Lamp of the Cosmos. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 3 Buddha fields, parallel to the world Endurance, is a world called Radiant Treasury of Light. Its Buddha is unimpeded light of wisdom pervading the cosmos. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 7 Buddha fields, at the top of this world system is a world called Supreme Body Fragrance, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called Flowers of the Branches of Enlightenment. Beyond the sea of fragrant water called Sphere of Inexhaustible Light is another sea of fragrant water called Full of Subtle Light, with a world system called Everywhere Undefiled. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called Canopy of Radiance, with a world system called Boundless Adornments. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called Array of Exquisite Jewels, with a world system called Parametric Form of Aromatic Crystals. Next, there is a sea of fragrant water called Producing the Sounds of Buddha's Voice, with a world system called Well-Structured Array. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Polar Mountain Treasury of Banners of Fragrance, with a world system called Light Filling Everywhere. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Subtle Light of Sandalwood, with a world system called Wreath of Flower Radiance. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Atmospheric Power Sustaining, with a world system called Banner of Clouds of Aromatic Flames. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Adornments of the Body of the King of Gods, with a world system called Pearl Treasury. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Level and Pure, with a world system called Various Adornments of Lapis Lazuli Dust. There are as many such seas of fragrant water as atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields. The one closest to the surrounding mountains is called Beautiful Tree Blossoms, having a world system called producing vast lands, composed of the sounds of all Buddhas vanquishing demons. At the bottom of this system is a world called Flaming Torch Banner. Its Buddha is called Ocean of Worldly Virtues. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, parallel to the world Diamond Banner, is a world called Producing Jewels. Its Buddha is Jewel Clouds of Invincible Power. Above this, parallel to the world Endurance, is a world called Raiment Banner. Its Buddha is King of the Ocean of Omniscience. At the top of this world system is a world called Jewel Necklace Lion Light. Its Buddha is called Lotus Banner of Skillful Transformation and Emanation. Beyond the sea of fragrant water called Diamond Flame Light is another sea of fragrant water called Banner Brightly Decorated with All Adornments, with a world system called Adorned by Pure Actions. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called Sea of Radiance of Flowers of All Jewels, with a world system called Adorned by Virtuous Characteristics. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Lotus Blooming, with a world system called Crown Jewels of Enlightening Beings. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Raiment of Exquisite Jewels, with a world system called Pure Pearl Orbs. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Lovely Flowers Illumining Everywhere, with a world system called Radiance of Clouds of 100 Lights. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Great Light Pervading Space, with a world system called Jewel Light Shining Everywhere. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Banner Adorned with Beautiful Flowers, with a world system called Gold Moon Eye Necklace. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Fragrant Ocean Treasury of Pearls, with a world system called Buddha Halo. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Jewel Disk Light, with a world system called Light Easily Displaying the Realm of Buddhahood. There are as many such seas of fragrant waters as atoms in an unspeakable number of Buddha fields. The one nearest to the surrounding mountains is called Boundless Discs Adorning the Floor. It has a world system called Distinctions of Innumerable Regions, composed of the sounds of the languages of all countries. At the bottom of the system is a world called Diamond Flower Canopy. The Buddha there is called Universal Sound of Light of Inexhaustible Features. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, is a world, parallel to the world Diamond Banner, called Banner Producing Precious Raiment. Its Buddha is called Great Power of Clouds of Virtue. Above this, parallel to the world Endurance, is a world called Beautiful Array of Implements of Myriad Jewels. Its Buddha is Ocean of Supreme Wisdom. At the top of this world system is a world called Banner of Raiment of Sunlight. Its Buddha is Lotus Cloud of the Sun of Knowledge. Beyond the sapphire array sea of fragrant water is another sea of fragrant water called Titan Palace, with a world system called Supported by Scented Light. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called Jewel Lion Array, with a world system called Revealing All the Jewels in All Regions. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Palace Color Light Clouds, with a world system called Beautiful Array of Jewel Globes. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Producing Gigantic Lotuses, with a world system called Beautiful Ornaments Lighting Up the Universe. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Wonderful Eye of Lamp Flames, with a world system called overseeing all transformations in the 10 directions. Next is a sea of fragrant water called sphere of inconceivable adornments, with a world system called universal renown of the light of the 10 directions. Next is a sea of fragrant water called jewel heap adornment, with a world system called lamplight radiance. Next is a sea of fragrant water called pure jewel light, with a world system called unobstructed wind. Next is a sea of fragrant water called balustrade draped with precious raiment, with a world system called light of Buddha's body. There are as many such seas as atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields. Closest to the surrounding mountains is a sea of fragrant water called banner decorated with trees, with a world system called resting peacefully in the imperial net, composed of the sounds of the stages of knowledge of all enlightening beings. At the bottom of this system is a world called golden. Its Buddha is called supremely majestic light of aromatic flames. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, parallel to the world diamond banner, is a world called crystal tree flowers. Its Buddha is called unhindered appearance anywhere. Above this, parallel to the world endurance, is a world called beautiful adornments of lapis lazuli. Its Buddha is called stable intellect mastering all principles. At the top of this world system is a world called sublime array of pure sounds. The Buddha is called king of light of lotuses blooming. Beyond the sea of fragrant water, diamond orb-adorned floor, is another sea of fragrant water called realm of magical production of lotus blossoms, with a world system called equality and justice in the land. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called crystal light, with a world system called no confusion throughout the universe. Next is a sea of fragrant water called sun crystal of many wonderful scents, with a world system called appearing in all quarters. Next is a sea of fragrant water called eternally admitting jewel rivers, with a world system called sounds of Buddha's speech carried out everywhere. Next is a sea of fragrant water called boundless deep wondrous sound, with a world system called boundless distinctions in location. Next is a sea of fragrant water called solid mass, with a world system called distinctions in innumerable places. Next is a sea of fragrant water called pure sound, with a world system called everywhere pure adornments. Next is a sea of fragrant water called sandalwood balustrade treasury of sound, with a world system called egregious banner. Next is a sea of fragrant water called adornment of light of diamonds of wonderful fragrance, with a world system called power of light appearing everywhere. Beyond the lotus blossom indranet sea of fragrant water is another sea of fragrant water called beautiful ornaments of silver lotus flowers, with a world system called universal action. Next is a sea of fragrant water called cloud of intense radiance of lapis lazuli bamboo, with a world system called everywhere producing the sounds of all quarters. Next is a sea of fragrant water called mass of light flames of the 10 directions, with a world system called always producing metamorphic displays distributed throughout the 10 directions. Next is a sea of fragrant water called gold-producing crystal banner, with a world system called form of diamond banners. Next is a sea of fragrant water called great equal adornments, with a world system called circle of bravery. Next is a sea of fragrant water called endless light of jewel flower groves, with a world system called boundless pure light. Next is a sea of fragrant water called gold banner, with a world system called expounding mysteries. Next is a sea of fragrant water called light beams shining everywhere, with a world system called everywhere adorned. Next is a sea of fragrant water called tranquil sound, with a world system called appearing hanging down. There are as many such seas as atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields. The one closest to the surrounding mountains is called intense flame cloud banner. Its world system, called array of all lights, is composed of the sounds of the beings assembled at the enlightenment sites of all Buddhas. At the bottom of this system is a world called pure eye adornment. Its Buddha is called diamond moon illumining the 10 directions. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, parallel to the world diamond banner, is a world called qualities of lotus blossoms, with a Buddha called greatly energetic, well-aware mind. Above this, parallel to the world endurance, is a world called dense arrays of diamonds, with a Buddha called Shala King Banner. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 7 Buddha fields, is a world called pure ocean adornments, with a Buddha called incomparable virtue, which none can conquer. Beyond the sea of fragrant water, treasury of accumulated precious incense, is another sea of fragrant water, called light of all jewels shining everywhere, with a world system called adornment of undefiled reputation. Next is a sea of fragrant water called flowers of many jewels blooming, with a world system called form of space. Next is a sea of fragrant water called tent of glory shining everywhere, with a world system called everywhere adorned with unimpeded light. Next is a sea of fragrant water called sandalwood tree blossoms, with a world system called whirl appearing everywhere. Next is a sea of fragrant water called producing jewels of exquisite colors, with a world system called supreme banner traveling everywhere. Next is a sea of fragrant water called everywhere producing diamond flowers, with a world system called displaying inconceivable adornments. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Mind King crystal wheel ornaments, with a world system called manifesting the unobstructed light of Buddha. Next is a sea of fragrant water called necklace of masses of jewels, with a world system called clearing away doubt. Next is a sea of fragrant water called everywhere adorned with rings of pearls, with a world system called flowing from the vows of the Buddhas. There are as many such seas as atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields. The one closest to the surrounding mountains is called Circle of Jewel Mines, with a world system called Universal Sound Banner, composed of the sounds of enunciation of ways of entry into omniscience. At the bottom of this world system is a world called Flower Pistil Flames, with a Buddha called Energetic Generosity. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, parallel to the world Diamond Banner, is a world called Lotus Light Banner, with a Buddha called Supreme Mind King with all virtues. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 3 Buddha fields, parallel to the world Endurance, is a world called 10 Directions Adorned, with a Buddha called King skillfully manifesting innumerable virtuous qualities. At the top of this world system is a world called Crystal Fragrance Mountain Banner, with a Buddha called Vast Benevolent Eyes Removing Doubt. Beyond the sea of fragrant water jewel array is a sea of fragrant water called Treasury of Light Supporting the Polar Mountain, with a world system called Producing Immense Clouds. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called Variously Adorned Realm of Great Power, with a world system called Adornments of Unobstructed Purity. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Thickly Spread Jewel Lotus Blossoms, with a world system called Supreme Lamp Array. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Resting on Adornments of All Jewels, with a world system called Treasury of Sunlight Webs. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Manifold Beatification, with a world system called Resting Place of Jewel Flowers. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Exercise of Extremely Brilliant Intellect, with a world system called Array of Superlative Forms. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Mountain Peak Holding Beautiful Precious Stones, with a world system called Universally Pure Treasury of Space. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Great Light Illumining Everywhere, with a world system called Sapphire Torchlight. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Filled with Delightful Jewels Illuminating Everywhere, with a world system called Ubiquitous Raw. There are as many such seas as atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields. The one closest to the surrounding mountains is called Producing Sapphires, with a world system called Everywhere Undifferentiated, composed of the booming voices of all enlightening beings. At the bottom of this system is a world called Exquisite Treasury, with a Buddha called Supremely Virtuous Mind. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, parallel to the world Diamond Banner, is a world called Embellishments, with a Buddha called Great Transcendental Light. Above this, parallel to the world Endurance, is a world called Everywhere Adorned with Lapis Lazuli Globes, with a Buddha called Polar Mountain Lamp. At the top of this world system is a world called Flower Banner Sea, with a Buddha called Cloud of Sublime Wisdom, capable of endless transmutations and productions. Beyond the sea of fragrant water, mass of diamonds, is another sea of fragrant water called Reverently Adorned Jewel Parapets, with a world system called Outstanding Jewel Banner. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called Array of Jewel Banners, with a world system called Manifesting All Lights. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Cloud of Sublime Jewels, with a world system called Universally Shining Light. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Adorned with Jewel Tree Blossoms, with a world system called Decorated with Beautiful Flowers. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Array of Raiment of Wonderful Jewels, with a world system called Ocean of Light. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Jewel Tree Peak, with a world system called Jewel Flame Cloud. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Displaying Light, with a world system called Entering Diamond with No Resistance. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Lotuses Adorning Everywhere, with a world system called Oceanic Abyss with Boundless Shores. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Array of Beautiful Jewels, with a world system called Treasury Displaying All Lands. Such seas are as numerous as atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields. The one nearest to the surrounding mountains is called Indestructible Sea, with a world system called lotus blossom setting, decorated with beautiful discs, composed of the sounds produced by all the powers of Buddhas. At the bottom of this system is a world called most sublime fragrance, with a Buddha called producing innumerable light beams. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, parallel to the world diamond banner, is a world called ornamental gates of inconceivably many distinctions, with a Buddha called immeasurable knowledge. Above this, parallel to the world endurance, is a world called beautiful flower treasury of the light of the 10 directions, with a Buddha called lion eye light flame cloud. At the top of this world system is a world called ocean sound, with a Buddha called gate of light flames of the heaven of waters. Beyond the sea of fragrant water, jewel ramparts of celestial cities, is another sea of fragrant water called brilliant light of a wheel of flames, with a world system called unspeakably many adornments of all kinds. Next to that is a sea of fragrant water called Jewel Dust Road, with a world system called everywhere entering infinite spirals. Next is a sea of fragrant water called containing all ornaments, with a world system called Jewel Light Shining Everywhere. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Spreading Jewel Nets, with a world system called Arrayed Deep and Thick. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Beautiful Jewel Array Banners, with a world system called Sound of Clear Understanding of the Ocean of Worlds. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Pure Reflection of the Palace of the Sun, with a world system called Entering Everywhere in Indra's Net. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Beautiful Sound of Music of All Drums, with a world system called Round and Full, Level and Straight. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Various Beautiful Adornments, with a world system called Cloud of Flames of Pure Intense Light. Next is a sea of fragrant water called Lamp with All-Pervasive Jewel Flames, with a world system called Various Forms According to the Original Vows of the Buddha. Such seas of fragrant waters are as numerous as atoms in unspeakably many Buddha fields. The one nearest to the surrounding mountains is called Raiment of Assembled Ornaments. Its world system, called Magically Produced Beautiful Raiment, is composed of the sound of the voices of all the Buddhas of past, present, and future. At the bottom of this system is a sea of fragrant water called Indra Flower Treasury, with a world called Producing Joy, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in a Buddha field, all uniformly pure. The Buddha is called Stable Enlightened Knowledge. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, parallel to the world Diamond Banner, is a world called Adorned with Jewel Nets, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 10 Buddha fields, all uniformly pure. The Buddha is called Light of Infinite Joy. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 3 Buddha fields, parallel to the world Endurance, is a world called Jewel Lotus Lion Throne, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 13 Buddha fields. The Buddha is called Most Pure Unwasteful Learning. Above this, past as many worlds as atoms in 7 Buddha fields, at the top of this world system is a world called Jewel Lotus Dragon Light, surrounded by as many worlds as atoms in 20 Buddha fields, uniformly pure. The Buddha there is called All-Illumining Light Pervading the Cosmos. In these seas of fragrant water, as many as atomic particles in 10 unspeakably large numbers of Buddha fields, are an equal number of world systems, all resting on lotus blossoms adorned with diamond banners in the forms of all enlightening beings, each with unbroken boundaries of ornaments, each radiating lights of jewel colors, each covered by clouds of lights, each with their particular adornments, particular time period differences, particular Buddhas appearing, particular oceans of teachings being expounded, particular beings filling their particular entries in the 10 directions, particular supports by the spiritual powers of all Buddhas. All of the worlds in each of these systems rest on various adornments, connecting with each other, forming a network of worlds, set up with various differences throughout the flower bank array ocean of worlds. Then, to recapitulate, the enlightening being universally good, receiving power from the Buddha, said in verse, "The flower bank ocean of worlds is equal to the universe. Its adornments are extremely pure, resting peacefully in space. In this ocean of worlds are inconceivably many world systems, each one independent. They are not all mixed up. In the flower bank world ocean, the world systems are well arrayed, with different shapes and adornments varying in appearance. The sounds of Buddha's displays are the substance of various systems. Seeing according to the power of acts, the world systems are finely adorned. Polar mountain city networks, circular shapes of whirlpools, immense lotus flowers blooming, they circle one another. Mountain banner palace shapes, whirling diamond shapes, like this are the inconceivable, vast systems of worlds. Flames of pearls from the ocean, inconceivable nets of light. The world systems like this all rest on lotus blossoms. The webs of light of each system cannot be fully described. In the lights appear all the lands throughout the seas in 10 directions. Into the ornaments adorning all the systems of worlds enter all the lands, making all visible everywhere. The world systems are inconceivable. The worlds are boundless. Their various fine embellishments derived from the great sage's power. In each of the systems of worlds, the worlds are inconceivably many, some forming, some decaying, some have already crumbled away. Like leaves in a forest, some growing and some falling, so too, in these systems, thus do worlds form and decay. Like, according to the forest, the various fruits are different, in these world systems, too, do various beings live. Just as when seeds are different, so are the fruits they produce. Because of differences in the force of acts, living beings' lands are not the same. Just as the Mind King jewel appears in different colors to different minds, when beings' minds are pure, they can see pure lands. Like great dragon kings creating clouds, filling the sky, so does the power of Buddha's vows produce the various lands. Just as the magician's arts can make various things appear, due to the force of beings' acts, the number of realms is inconceivable. Just like pictures drawn by an artist, so are all worlds made by the painter mind. Beings' bodies' differences arise from the mind's discriminations. Thus are the lands varied, all depending on acts. Just as the guide is seen in various different forms, so do beings see the lands according to their mental patterns. The borders of all the worlds are draped with lotus nets, their various features different, their adornments are all pure. In those lotus nets rest networks of lands with various adornments, inhabited by various beings. Some lands are dangerous and uneven. Because of beings' afflictions, they see them in this way. Innumerable kinds of worlds, defiled as well as pure, develop according to beings' minds, maintained by enlightening beings' power. In some lands is purity as well as defilement. This arises from the force of deeds, under the influence of enlightening beings. Some lands are made of pure jewels radiating light, with various fine adornments purified by the Buddhas. In each system of lands are aeonic fires inconceivable. While it appears disastrous, the places always remain secure. By the force of beings' acts are many lands produced, supported by wind atmospheres or resting on water spheres. The phenomena of the worlds are thus variously seen, yet they really have no origination and also no disintegration. In each moment of mind are infinite lands produced. By the Buddha's spiritual power, all are seen as pure. Some lands are made of dirt, their substance very hard, dark with no light shining. They're inhabited by evildoers. Some lands are made of thunderbolts, mixed up and terrifying, with much misery and little happiness, the abodes of those of scant virtue. Some are made of iron, some of ruddy copper, with stone mountains steep and fearsome, full of animals. Among the lands are hells, where beings cannot be saved from pain, always in the dark, burnt by seas of flame. Some again have animals of various wretched forms. Because of their own evil deeds, they always suffer affliction. Some see a netherworld oppressed by hunger and thirst. Climbing great mountains of fire, they suffer extreme pain. There are also some lands composed of precious elements, with various kinds of mansions. These are realized by pure deeds. You should observe these worlds, the humans and celestials therein. Developed by results of pure deeds, they feel happiness all the time. In each and every pore are unthinkable billions of lands, adorned in various ways, with never any cramp. By the individual acts of beings, these worlds are infinite in kind. Therein are born attachments and differences of misery and happiness. Some lands are made of jewels, always radiating boundless light. Diamond lotus flowers adorn them, totally pure. Some lands are made of light, resting too on spheres of light, golden with sandalwood scent, flaming clouds illumining all. Some lands are made of lunar discs, draped with fragrant robes, in a lotus blossom filled with enlightening beings. Some lands are made of many jewels, their colors without impurities, like the imperial net of Indra, always shining with light. Some lands are made of fragrance, some are diamond flowers. Their forms of crystal light are most pure when looked into. There are also inconceivably many lands made of flower wreaths, filled with phantom Buddhas and radiance of enlightening beings. There are some pure lands, all of flowering trees, beautiful boughs spread over sanctuaries, shaded by crystal clouds. Some lands are made of diamond flowers with pure light. Some are sounds of Buddha's teaching, forming boundless networks of arrays. Some lands are like the jeweled crowns of enlightening beings. Some are shaped like thrones issuing from magical light. Some are sandalwood powder, some like emanated light, some the sounds in Buddha's aura, formed into a wondrous land. Some see pure lands adorned with a single light. Some see many ornaments, all variously superb. Some have for adornments the marvelous things of 10 lands. Some are adorned with everything in 1,000 lands. Sometimes one land is embellished with the things of 1,000,000,000 lands, their various features unalike, all appearing as reflected images. The things of unspeakably many lands adorn a single land, each radiating light produced by the Buddha's vows. There are some lands purified by the power of vows. In each of their adornments are seen all oceans of worlds. The pure lands, realized by those who practice the vows of universal good, manifest within themselves the adornments of past, present, and future lands. You should observe, O children of Buddha, the spiritual power in the systems of worlds. The worlds of the future, all they'll show you, like in a dream. The worlds of the 10 directions, the oceans of lands of the past, all within a single land, show their forms like phantoms. All Buddhas of past, present, and future, as well as their lands, can all be observed in a single world system. The spiritual power of all Buddhas shows many lands in an atom, of various kinds, all clearly seen. Like reflections, they have no true reality. There are many lands whose forms are like oceans, and lands like polar mountains are inconceivable in number. Some lands are well disposed, formed like Indra's net. Some are shaped like forests with Buddhas filling them. Some are shaped like jewel discs, some like lotus blossoms, or octagonal with all decorations. They're various and all pure. Some are shaped like seats, some again are triangular. Some are like pure jewels, castle walls, or celestial bodies. Some are like God's top-knots, some like the half-moon. Some are like crystal mountains, some like the solar orb. The shape of some of the worlds is like whirlpools in a fragrant sea. Some are spheres of light, purified by Buddha's past. Some are shaped like wheel rims, some are altar-shaped. Some are like Buddha's hair curl, his flesh top-knot, or large, long eyes. Some are like Buddha's hand, some like thunderbolts. Some are like mountains of flames. Enlightening beings fill them all. Some are shaped like lions, some like seashells. Of infinite colors and forms, their substances are each distinct. In one system of worlds are endless forms of lands. All depend on Buddha's vow power for protection and stability. Some lands last an eon, some exist for 10 eons, or for more eons than atoms in 100,000 lands. In a single eon, lands are seen to dissolve, measureless or countless, or inconceivably many of them. Some lands have a Buddha, and some lands do not. Some have just one Buddha, and some have countless Buddhas. If a land has no Buddha, then a Buddha from another world will mystically appear there, to manifest the worlds of Buddhas, dying in heaven and descending in spirit, residing in a womb and being born, vanquishing demons and becoming enlightened, turning the wheel of the unexcelled teaching. According to the inclinations of beings' minds, Buddha manifests various forms, teaching them the sublime truth in accord with each of their faculties. In each Buddha field, a Buddha appears in the world, spending billions of years expounding unexcelled truths. If beings are not vessels of truth, they cannot see the Buddhas. If any have the will, they see Buddha everywhere. In each individual Buddha field is a Buddha appearing in the world. The Buddhas in all lands are inconceivable in number. Herein, each and every Buddha shows countless mystic transformations, pervading the entire universe, taming the ocean of beings. Some lands have no light, they're dark and full of fear, with pains like knives and swords. Those who see them suffer by themselves. Some have heavenly lights, some lights of palaces. Some have sun and moon lights. Inconceivable are the networks of lands. Some lands are inherently luminous. In some, the trees emit pure light. There has never been suffering there, due to the power of being's virtue. Some have lights of mountains. Some have crystal lights. Some are lit by lamps, all the force of being's deeds. Some have Buddha's auras, filled with enlightening beings. Some are lotus blossom lights, with magnificent blazing colors. Some lands are lit by flower lights, some by the sheen of fragrant waters, or by perfumes and burning incense. All comes from the force of pure vows. Some are lit by cloud lights, some by jewel oysters lights. The light of Buddha's mystic power can intone gladdening sounds. Some are lit by jewel lights, some by diamond flames. Their pure sounds can shake far-off realms. Wherever they reach, there are no pains. Some have crystal lights or lights from ornaments, or from enlightenment scenes shining in the crowds. Buddha emanates a great light filled with phantom Buddhas. That light touches all with its glow, pervading the whole cosmos. Some lands are terrifying, with great howls of pain. Those voices most bitter and harsh, frightening all who hear. The realms of hells and beasts, as well as the netherworlds, these are polluted, evil worlds, from which always come cries of pain and distress. There are some lands that always produce enjoyable sounds, pleasing in accord with the teaching that is attained by pure deeds. In some lands are always heard heavenly sounds of various gods, pure sounds of celestial realms, or the voices of leaders of the worlds. There are some lands that produce wonderful sounds from clouds. They're filled with jewel seas, crystal trees, and music. In the auras of the Buddhas are endless magical voices, and those of enlightening beings heard throughout all lands. The voices expounding the teaching in inconceivably many lands, the voices produced by the ocean of vows, the wondrous tales of practical action. The Buddhas of past, present, and future are born in the various worlds, fulfilling all their epithets, their voices without any end. In some lands is heard the voice of all Buddha's powers. The stages, the transcendent ways, and such teachings are all expounded. The power of the vows of universal good intones wondrous sayings in billions of worlds that sound like thunder shaking, remaining for endless ages. The Buddhas in pure lands manifest independent speech heard by one and all, throughout the cosmos, everywhere.